This is the Andres Aguilera Show. My guest today is Rucksack Radio's Tommy Liberty. First time on the program, but we've known each other for some time across the socials. By the way, Star Dream says you're a pro troll, Tommy. LOL. Sometimes.
It's it's a lot of years of experience in dealing in the mud.
No, I
That
bet.
mudslinging of
It,
it. It's not a fun environment. It's an
it's
ugly
not.
environment. It's toxic.
And I agree with you. And while you have people that are either fans or just know you from elsewhere in the chat, my audience may not know who you are. So let's qualify you here. For those who may not know Tommy Liberty, tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, I've been podcasting for several years, and Rucksack Radio is where I primarily what I've been doing. I've got you can go rucksackradio.com is a website. I do some blogging too. I haven't done as much with that recently, but last year into last summer, I kind of got away from it. And here's why. I got away from more of just my regular podcast because I had a moment of self-awareness and realized that I was drifting into the same trap that not only the entire mainstream media is, but a lot of political podcasters are, where it's just making the noise of the narratives, right? You get into a groove because it's so mainstream to be upset about what is happening in our country. And a lot of that comes from legitimate fear, right? I mean, we all are upset and fearful of what's happening in different areas of our country. And that stands true for whatever side of the aisle people are on. You're human. If you fear what's going on with politics, you want to speak out about it, right? It's natural. But ultimately, that doesn't change anything. And we have created these massive echo chambers and these massive places for groupthink, right? And I will tell you that there is a duality with X that has happened. On one side, Elon Musk came in and he championed free speech, right? He got the site back and he opened it up. But on the other side, when he monetized it the way he did for influencers, he opened it up for engagement farming and the clickbait stuff to where so much of it has become about vanity and the sensationalism that's what's driving clicks for people. So people are getting out there and they're driving. I can prey on people's emotions and drive clicks because that's going to pay me. And that's not helping discourse. It's not helping us solve problems. And politicians are some of the worst purveyors of this. They push it worse than many. And I think a large reason for that is because of some of the immunity that politicians have in the speech and debate clause in our Constitution, right? They have a lot more leeway. They can get away with a lot more because there's not as much consequence to the speech that they give. There's still there's consequences for speech, right? There's consequences with rights come responsibilities, right? Well, those in Congress, they have a lot more immunity and they can get away with a lot more. So they've become, rather than use the intent of that speech and debate clause is to be a productive mechanism for them to be able to be responsible and legislate more responsibly. Well, they've exploited that and they've used that as a wedge, as an ability to drive more rhetoric and pry people apart and prey on the emotions of people, I think. And that just, it causes more of a frenzy and it causes more of a problem. So we need to get back to having reasoned discussions where we break down the argument, the merit of the arguments. And the way to do that is to get the noise out of them, to remove the subjective pieces out of them that aren't helpful and get back to the logic behind them, get back to the argument, the merits of what's truthful. And it's a huge piece of it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the only reason all this noise is amplified is because the fourth branch of government, the mainstream media, and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's left or right, folks. It's the same thing, and that's what's frustrating because what the right accuses the left of doing, the right does the same thing. And I get upset honestly when people just label Fox as the right wing. It's like, really? Have you guys even watched Fox? But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean they don't have right wing commentators. It's just that they don't hide it. Whereas you're not going to get anything more than just a bunch of propaganda, socialist communist propaganda stuff from like MSNBC types. CNN occasionally does what Rush Limbaugh used to call
Yeah.
drive what is it, a random act of journalism. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it is true that there's a lot out there of in noise. And one thing I do not like, because they call it social media, there's nothing social about it. And during 2020, I stepped away a little bit from social media because I had to. But I did post because everybody's talking about social distancing. I'm like, we need social media distancing because I remind people that look, social media is not real life. But a lot of us still use it as that portal into either connecting with people as we thought it would be, but now it's understanding this hyper engineering thing. I do not like that a lot of the emphasis has been put on TikTok. TikTok, oh, they're spying for the CCP. Okay, I was going to put this poll up for my Instagram users because that's where my biggest audience is. So let me get this straight. Well, let me ask you guys this: what is more dangerous for you, or what do you prefer? CCP spying on you when you willingly give your stuff over on TikTok, or all these big tech oligarchs who feed it all to their big corporations that also feed it to the United States government through
Yeah.
everything else that you use? Pick one, because everybody likes to complain about TikTok, and some on the right, some of the intelligence officials, some politicians have called for the banning of TikTok, which, like, I am wholeheartedly against them doing that because it's a very slippery slope and will set a very bad precedent if we do that. But it is true that we have a bunch of echo chambers, and you probably heard me cover Gab. I covered it here.
Yeah.
Hold on, what's Star Dream say? I don't watch any of them. Got rid of cable and have more peace. Um, yes, and speaking
Well,
of which, cable is now cheaper
yeah.
because everybody has to pay for the subscriptions now.
Yeah. It's, let me, to that point, I think we have to remember there's two things. Because the media communicates something that might be propaganda, it doesn't mean that everything the media communicates is propaganda. We have to understand that there is truth in information that they communicate. We have to be smarter in understanding what is information and what is propaganda. And that goes back to our process of thinking. What am I hearing right now? And
Mhm.
what is logical about this? And what is an emotional appeal? And every media, you have to consume, it's my opinion, that to be fully informed, you have to consume bits and pieces of information from just about every outlet. That's you're not going to get the full story because not every outlet is going to, because they do have agendas and they're corporate driven, and they work with lobbyists no different than politicians. They all are in the same, they're all networked into the same corporations, and yeah, so it's hand in glove with a lot of them. So you really do have to consume bits and pieces from everywhere if you want the full story. Um, and the reason that's important is because these mainstream outlets, they do have the most resources. They have the most reach. They're the most connected. They have the most access. And so it's important. I'm not saying that exclusively, no, because there are so many other outlets out there that are smaller, and independent journalists that are great sources of information to go to, supplemental sources that are hugely important. But I don't think it's right to just tune out mainstream media or to say I'm never going to watch CNN or I'm never going to watch Fox, or I think you're doing yourself an intellectual disservice by doing that, because you're shutting off pieces of information that are factually correct. Not all of it, but there is information in there that's true. And it's a piece of the puzzle that if you want to be fully informed, you're not getting. And it's important. I think that's where we have to set our pride aside in favor of our self-awareness. And that it's a harder thing to do, but that's where we get tripped up in some of these narratives. I'll tell you, let me explain something, because that is a big part of these dialogues, the Arcadian dialogues, and is putting the pride in our biases aside. What we did is, I don't know if you're familiar with Political Compass. It's a survey that's out there online. It's pretty interesting. It's a
Yes, I
series
have.
of, I don't know, it might be 30 or 40 questions or statements. And some of them are
Oh,
more ambiguous.
where it tries to put you like in some kind of
It
category.
yeah, it plots a graph,
Yeah,
right?
I've
And
seen
there's
these. Yeah.
so in north south, the y-axis is kind of uh, it plots like in an authoritarian or libertarian kind of mind. It's kind of the
Hmm.
ideals of liberty. Where are your ideals of liberty? How liberty minded are you? And for the x-axis, kind of plots on a socioeconomic left right, kind of the mechanics of liberty. How do you feel you should maintain and achieve liberty? Um, well, this small focus group that I have, that we're working on these dialogues, and a few others that are involved who aren't in the dialogues, we all did this survey. And then, yes, that's exactly it. We all did this survey, and then we compared our results and we plotted them on here. And what was interesting is we all lined up almost in a, it was eerie how much in a straight line left to right we were, in terms of, we all felt liberty. We saw it the same.
Hmm.
Our we were on the bottom, near the bottom half or so of that, of libertarian minded, kind of nowhere, you know, in our feelings about liberty. But from the left to right scale, there was there's quite a bit of disparity between us. And that's what we decided to exploit in these dialogues, because we said, hey, so this all this time we've been sitting in this group and we generally agree on so much stuff, because we see liberty the same way. We all agree on all these freedoms and the idea of liberty and the Constitution, but we're not talking about the mechanics of it and how we get there. And there's these great disparities, and that led to the idea of these dialogues, because there were differences in how we saw things on this survey. Uh, so that's kind of the inceptionist. That's part of it. There are other components of Arcadian that are coming down the road.
Yeah.
These dialogues are just one piece of it, and there are many more dialogues coming. We've released 3 so far, but I think they are an important uh, step in the right direction towards the right kind of discussions and the right kind of arguments, if you will, because they focus on that objective material, not the subjective noise in the narratives. That's
Yeah.
one piece that's important to the point of your show today in the civil discourse. That for people that are liberty minded, that's one point. And then the other point is then people actually getting active and do things. There's getting in your community and actually being involved is another thing. There's so many people out there doing stuff, and somebody else that um Ryan, who Liberty is calling, I know he's got a new podcast now. He's somebody, another one who's very he ran for school board, and he's somebody else that was active in the parlor community early on, and has had a loud voice out there trying to get people engaged in discussions and do things. There's so many voices out there that aren't in the mainstream who are actually trying to do things and be
Yeah.
engaged outside of that noise. Yeah, and it's disappointing that we have the platforms seem to reward uh, just the vanity and the sensationalism.
Well, and that has a lot more to do with the fact that that's how these platforms will get the funds. To your
Yeah.
second point, it's more be the change you want to see.
Yep.
With your first point, it's about discernment, and that's what I feel that some people don't access critical thinking.